Hello and welcome to The Stack. For this week's show, we feature a brand new film publication from the team behind New York cinema Metrograph. Plus, Jeremy Leslie from Magculture reviews the year for magazines, and photographer Tyler Mitchell. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show with exciting news from Metrograph, the stunning New York movie theater founded in 2016. With a touch of the 1920s, it is one of the best places in the city to watch a movie. The independent cinema also just launched a brand new film publication featuring long-form interviews, intimate portraits of film technicians at work, and plenty of great movie essays. The first issue includes an interview with Clint Eastwood, an essay on Filipino action movies, and more. It was a pleasure talking to the Metrograph's senior editor, Annabelle Brady-Brown, and editor-at-large, Nick Pinkerton.
So the Metrograph is a beloved, iconic Manhattan theater where we play classics, new releases, archival prints. It's started in 2016 and it's a really special place. I'm very happy to work here. You get to come on the weekend and contrary to some of the narratives about what's going on in cinema, you walk in, it's a beautiful theater and it's absolutely filled with all sort of young people, old people, people from all sorts of backgrounds, discovering cinema, revisiting movies they love. And then we also have a beautiful bookstore, we have a bar and a restaurant. So people come and sort of hang out and stay and really feel part of a community here. And so the magazine is just a really natural extension of that.
Nick, I wonder, how was the process to say, hey, we actually need a magazine for it? Did it make sense? Was that one of those ideas that are like, oh my God, why haven't we done this before? Or were you a bit cautious? I wonder, tell me about the early days when you decided to launch the title.
I think it's something that had been kicked around for quite a while. And as over the course of the last couple of years, we expanded editorial activity at Metrograph on the journal section of the website and started putting together a more and more robust team. It was a kind of logical next step, and also because, there's a bit of a hole in the marketplace right now with so many of the more, let's say, serious-minded or elevated film magazines having gone under. And I think part of the impetus was wanting to reverse that trend or push back against that trend a little bit. So, I can't claim to be the main driver, mover, and shaker on any of this, but was pleased to be able to lend a hand in some way.
And Annabelle, as Nick was saying, there was perhaps a gap in the film press when it comes to magazines as well. And I don't know in the US if it's similar to the UK as well, where the newspapers, the dailies, they've increased their coverage of cinema. And maybe this has also affected magazines. But there's definitely a space for a title like yours for really the cinema fans, not necessarily just guided by new releases or press releases as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what Metrograph is about is sort of about a love of movies beyond just that, PR junket cycle, the movies that we come back to and return to many times again and again, and that, are a meaningful part of all our lives. And the magazine is, a natural extension of that idea where from every part of it, if you think of the way that a lot of readers engage with film writing online, on newspapers disappearing, blogs. It's a very sort of transient, ephemeral experience where what we wanted to really create with the print magazine is something timeless, enduring, lasting, that plays an important part in people's lives. The magazine has been really beautifully designed. We're really lucky to work with the firm Pentagram, and every element of it. The paper is beautiful Italian paper. We're using wonderful printers. It's full of incredible original art. it's a product in the end that, you want to like gift a friend, you want to keep on your shelf forever, you want it to share it with people and be part of your life. So I think print is a medium that really conveys those pleasures and extends that experience and reinforces cinema as a crucial and sort of communal element of all our lives and the reason that we keep coming back to it.
And in a way, the magazine as well, it's a kind of an expansion of the brand. Of course, the cinema is very much associated with New York, but I believe the idea is for the magazine, to be sold in other places, perhaps even here in London as well, which I know that's where the magazine is being printed. So was that the idea? It's an expansion of the brand as well, right?
It is, and yeah, it's very much for an international audience. It's sort of like taking that experience of stepping into the Metrograph theater, and for those who can't be in Manhattan, getting a taste of that anywhere around the world. And yeah, the magazine, we have an international distributor, so it should be in, select boutique bookstores all around the world. If you are a bookseller and interested, please get in touch. It's very important to us that a lot of people have access to it. And that extends, a lot of the contributors, the writers, the visual artists are not just Americans, but they're people, filmmakers, I should also say, of course. This is very much a global celebration.
Well, and Nick, so much of a global celebration that I believe right in the first, in the kind of the editor's letter, there's also a picture of Clint Eastwood and Catherine Deneuve. And I think you guys were thinking a lot about that picture because maybe the magazine will have space for both of those titans. I mean, and I have to say there is a special interview of Clint Eastwood in the new issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much sort of the modus operandi in thinking about how we want to put this magazine together is that you can have maybe more esoteric and lesser known films and filmmakers alongside rather well-known figures who you're perhaps getting to see new facets of or seeing written about in a different way. That's not to suggest that Catherine Deneuve is by any way, shape, or form somebody you can consider a obscure or esoteric character, but the fact that these are two sort of iconic representatives of a popular cinematic tradition and to some degree somebody who's been connected to high modernist European cinema and to go beyond that as well, to have a really properly international scope where, for example, there's a piece addressing the reconstitution of African films into specifically African archives. I have a long piece about the Hong Kong filmmaker Anne Hui, and to really focus on and make a point of having a wide-ranging, eclectic survey of world cinema from all sorts of different traditions, from all different places in the world, having that reflected also in our contributors. And to be able to, of course, yes, the magazine is very much connected to Metrograph, the physical space, and to Metrograph, the streaming service, and all the other things that the company offers. But by virtue of being a biannual, it can't be, as Annabelle said, and as you suggested, it can't really be tied to a release cycle or the junket circuit. So what we can do instead is really take our time and hopefully make every issue an event, something that's very special, that's very bespoke, that we put an enormous amount of work and elbow grease into, and that will be something that people want to live with.
And Annabelle, there was a sense of discovery from you when I was reading the first issue. I love the article about the Filipino action films, which I didn't know much about it. And you know what? That after reading it, probably I want to, watch some of them. I got very interested. So I think perhaps that's also one of the intentions of the Metrograph as well, perhaps for people to, look out for something different, perhaps, because I know that's what's on your cinema. I saw the list of films. Sometimes it's a little bit esoteric, as I said, but I think that's very nice for a film fan.
We've talked a lot about trying to find that sweet spot where The magazine is going to be not just accessible, but pleasurable, enjoyable to a reader who is both someone who's sort of like wandering into cinema, doesn't think of themselves as a cinephile, but, knows that they enjoy watching movies, and also someone who might even, identify as like a hardcore cinephile. We think that there is something for all of these people in this magazine. And yeah, the piece you mentioned by Matika Ramirez Escobar on the Filipino action cinema, I think is a good example where that is a particular genre that has been written less about, people know less about, but there's a lot of riches in there waiting to be uncovered. And then at the other spectrum, you have something like Clint Eastwood. He's 94 years old. He's an absolute living legend, pop culture icon. His 40th directorial feature has just come out. People very much know this man and his name, but at the same time, the way that he's treated in the magazine, in Nick's incredible long interview, which is like the first of our flagship Metrograph interview series, it's to really go into the topic with a level of depth, care, rigor, but also, fun, I guess, and bring the subject alive so that even people who, they feel maybe they've watched 15 Clint Eastwood movies can still learn a little bit more.
Thank you for adding a crossword as well. I think that's fun. That's really always fun. And I was going to ask perhaps, both of you, if you want to pitch in, because, we've been reading, that the box office kind of getting back to normal post-COVID. But I wonder, especially in the US, what do you think is the state of indie cinemas? I mean, are you both optimistic about it, or do you have anything to say about that right now?
Dismal is really in terms of first run distribution, but I'm not doom and gloom about it at all. I think what's the case in the US, and I think this is also very much true of the UK as well, is that for so long, the exhibitors and distributors to a certain degree have been focused on a demographic that is their bread and butter, which is boomers, which is, people 65 and older. And that has been the crowd that they have depended on to, make their nut at the end of the year. And I think post-COVID, a lot of that crowd is not coming back. A lot of that crowd is shuffling off this mortal coil. Exhibitors, bookers, I think are often of that same demographic and don't know how to build and cultivate a younger audience. I think that necessarily to survive, that's going to start happening, and it has started happening with certain theaters, and there's been a sort of upswing of micro cinema activity in the United States, and I think in the UK as well, and other places around the world. So it's going to be a slow turnaround, and I think it will probably get worse before it gets better. But, people still go to see the ballet and the grand opera and live theater. No art form that's come into existence has disappeared after the fact.
Magazines as well.
Yeah. So I do believe we'll find our way through the wilderness, but it's a pretty iffy situation. One area that has, I think, not only weathered the storm but really thrived is repertory film programming, which is, of course, nice for us. And you have seen a lot of younger people, which, as somebody who's been 20 years in New York and going to repertory films all this time, that wasn't always the case. And the people who are coming out to see, whatever, a Sergei Paraganov retrospective, you're seeing much younger people who have a real fascination with and hunger for the kind of great films in the art house high modernist tradition. It hasn't really trickled down into new releases as much, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
As Nick said, there is this really buzzy energy that you get when you walk into Metrograph on the weekend, and it is just full, and often of like young people. There are 18-year-olds who are so excited to, I don't know, see Vertigo for the first time. And that's a really nice counter sort of narrative, I think, to that larger story. And it would also behoove us to mention that Metrograph, I'm not sure if people in the UK are aware of this as much as in the US, but Metrograph itself has recently expanded one of its arms into distribution as well, into independent releases, particularly working with young Americans. And so Metrograph Pictures Company has a slate of incredible films that they've been putting out. Something like Good One, I think, is a nice case example. It's playing at festivals and now playing around the world. And it's just exciting to see what could happen, when smart people curate something well and are much more attuned to their audience. Yeah, where we can go.
Thank you, Annabelle and Nick. The first issue of the Metrograph can be ordered on metrograph.com. And next, we join Monocle's fashion director Natalie Theodosi backstage at the Fashion Awards, which took place earlier this week at the Royal Albert Hall in London. Here she spoke to photographer Tyler Mitchell, who skyrocketed to fame after shooting Beyoncé for the cover of Vogue at the tender age of 23. In the 6 years since, he has gone from strength to strength, perfecting a style of photography which blends documentary, fashion, and fine art. Natalie caught Tyler just after receiving the Isabella Award for Fashion Creator and asked him how it felt to win the accolade.
Yeah, it's lovely. I was just joking that Rihanna saw me give a speech, so that's nice. No, it's nice. I mean, the Royal Albert Hall is surreal. I said in my speech that I'm all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm from a family that's not necessarily directly artistic or in fashion, so I'm a bit of a UFO in that way, and I'm just really happy to be here. It's nice to be acknowledged as a photographer and as an artist.
And you said that this is a city where you met a lot of your collaborators, a lot of designers that you worked with that commissioned some of your first works. Yes. What is it about London you think that brings people together like that?
It's a creative breeding ground. It's a wellspring of creative thinkers, of free thinkers. I think it has that culture built into it from very early, and that's continuing on now. And when I came here for the first time, I realized people here deeply understand craft and have a reverence for craft, have a reverence for fashion in a way I've never seen before. And so that's what inspired me, and I think that's what keeps this city so special.
And you're so young, but you've already done so much. And has your work already evolved, or your overall perspective, approach to photography and image making?
It's always evolving. Always evolving. My approach is always changing, always shifting, always growing.
Anything that you haven't done so far that you want to do more of in the new year?
Yeah, well,
you mentioned a Rihanna cover.
Absolutely, a Rihanna cover. But I also, and there's of course, photography has become this wonderful thing where I can connect with people who I look up to. I can depict and photograph people who are my friends. The wonderful, supermodels who presented me my award, Anak and Mona. It forms friendships, it forms families. That's what photography does. So the more I can do that, the better my life will be. But also, I have a dream to make a movie one day. So let's see how that goes. Yeah.
And it's a time where storytelling and images like yours can really kind of change the conversation, right?
Absolutely, it is. Storytelling, genuine storytelling, less fluff and less stuff is what we all need.
Thank you, Tyler, and you can listen more interviews from the Fashion Awards on Monocle's dedicated show to fashion, called, of course, Monocle on Fashion. And it is almost Christmas, a good time to do some shopping and perhaps stop by at London's magazine shop Magculture to buy cool titles for your loved ones. Helmed by Jeremy Leslie, Magculture has always been a Stack favorite. Jeremy stopped by here at Midori House for a 2024 look back in the world of magazines and what he is wishing to see more next year.
I have a very positive outlook on it. Always in the back of my mind, I'm sort of thinking at some point there's going to be a real hiccup. Something's going to really sort of demonstrate that actually the optimism was misaligned. But I have to say this year, it's onward and upward. We've seen this development of a kind of constellation of magazines, and there's a sort of understanding of these are the big ones, these are the smaller ones, there's this whole influx of newer ones. But then we've also, I'm feeling very positive as we come to the end of this year and looking into the next year, because so many people are turning to print, young graduates, students that are still wanting to make their personal projects very, relatively small in that constellation I mentioned. But you've got some big organisations like Mubi, feels. The dating app have just moved into print. There's a lot of people sort of pivoting back to print in a really positive way, I think. And if you look to America, some of the big old brands of publishing are returning, having forsaken print just a few years ago, realising they made a mistake and are moving back to it. So Life, Spin, things like this. Maybe you won't be surprised. I've tried to be negative, but I can only be positive.
No, I think you're very honest there. And even looking at Magculture, browsing through the titles, it's impressive how you've added many titles as well. You know, you always had a very good selection, but I feel you have more and more. So clearly, you know, it's also good for your business.
Well, the two go hand in hand, don't they? I mean, you know, it's the shop is very busy, both in store, especially at this time of year, but also online. But the shop wouldn't exist without the magazines. You know, we need the magazines and we love the magazines. That's why we exist. But there are more and more of them. You know, I'm sure I must have mentioned before, but we have a stack of kind of submitted magazines on the shared desk and behind the shop at Magculture, and it just grows and grows. And we can't keep up with the level of expectation in terms of getting, you know, will you sell my magazine? There's so much. You know, we did Magculture Live just around the corner in London about a month ago, and it was such a positive feeling because there's so much. People want print. It provides something really vital and central to people's lives. And it's not, you know, creatively it's booming. Economically, it's still struggling in many ways, but there's still enough creative energy behind it that a lot will break through.
And including with the big brands, because of course we have the smaller titles, as you say, graduates as well. But I think even, you know, luxury brands or someone like Mubi, for example, they're understanding the power of print and how this will actually even be good for their own companies as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's particularly the case with, I mean, Mubi's a very good example. They're a digital entity. You know, they had no communication other than email newsletters and such with their audience. But through the magazine, through having something in print, they can build on what they are. They can express more about their feeling and their belief in film, which is their thing, you know, independent filmmaking. And they can produce a magazine that kind of adds flesh to that basic skeleton. It builds it out and expresses the basic core of what they're doing in a way that, you know, it's very hard if you're running a streaming site.
So when you mentioned Mubi, I think it's coming out very soon, a Metrograph, the New York cinema, they're also making their own magazine as well. So that's super interesting. What about in terms of new releases? Were there any themes as well? Because I've done quite a lot on the stack food magazines this year. It's impressive how all sorts of types. You have Morgan Mate about breakfast and many others here. But besides food, or maybe food is indeed the big star here when we talk about themes.
Well, I mean, I think there are some basic kind of genres of magazines. Food, there have always been food magazines, and it's so elemental to our lives. I think that people are always figuring new ways of expressing their love for food, whether it be Asian food and culture with Fat Boy Zine or, as you say, Morgan Mate with breakfast. I think we've seen lots of food magazines. There's sort of some, as well as those kind of traditional genres like food, fashion, design, art, you know, the sport, the magazines that have always been. I think we've seen sort of a few more, slightly more conceptual things, and I think the success of MacGuffin has brought a number of magazines in its wake, which are focusing on really small niches to express bigger stories. So I think one particular favourite in that realm would be Kosei Journal, which we just did the launch for in London recently. It's from Milan. Kosei means things. Each one, and this is its similarity to MacGuffin, although it's a very, very different magazine. But each issue deals with one thing. They've done the table, and now they've done the desk. But it's a much more sort of, from an art direction standpoint, a far more kind of flamboyantly produced magazine than MacGuffin, which is more research orientated. But it's that idea of looking at small things and discovering the general is, to me, a very interesting theme that's running. You've got Kosei, you've got Dirty Furniture, although that's just published its final issue. That's something we're seeing. People trying to, you know, as I say, dig out the general from the very specific.
What do you think we should see more of, or we will see more of, from your kind of research and everything?
Well, you know, as I've been expressing my positive feeling about the current state of print, and in a way that sits in contrast with this year's world. It's been a tough year in terms of elections and stuff, the news in America and everything. But I do think off the back of that, we're going to see more, I hope we're going to see more political direction in magazines. I think there's a real space there for people to start telling stories that are contrary to the kind of dirt of X and social media.
That's very interesting. Even important magazines, I would say, like, I mean, some groups like Condé Nast, you know, they have a certain political view. They perhaps not very direct, but no, that's an interesting trend. Looking ahead for 2025, How is Magculture doing? By the way, will you guys be open during the Christmas season?
No, we take a well-earned rest for the Christmas week. So we
do it as well here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to say if you know that you love Christmas, but the one thing I really enjoy about it is it's when the email all goes quiet and everything calms down. It's the 1 week when everything just doesn't happen, and that's a relief. And then you're energized for the 2nd of January and then return.
But in general, for 2025, still optimistic? Are you already thinking about all the many events that Magculture hosted? It's not just Magculture Live. There's been so many kind of workshops, and it's been impressive. It's been a good year for events. And do you think this will continue?
Oh, yeah. We're already planning. We'll be doing another masterclass in February. We'll be back. Magculture Live should be happening probably late April this year in New York. And then the shop events, we've got a first shop event scheduled for February. That's a really important part of what we do is bringing people together. Yeah, so that's all already in hand. So yes, looking forward to the new year.
That's fantastic. And now a little bit of a left field question. What will you be reading during the Christmas season? I mean, magazines, or perhaps you're just going to grab a book?
I read a lot of books. I do read a lot of novels, and I'll be continuing that. I'm currently reading Creation Late by Rachel Kushner, one of the Booker Prize listed. I'm looking forward to reading Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. My wife's reading it at the moment. As soon as she's finished, I'm diving into that because I enjoyed there was an excerpt of it in the New Yorker a year or so ago, and I really enjoyed that. But I will be taking, it's also a time I can read magazines. So one of the things we're doing at the moment with the Magculture team is asking them to pick their kind of choice, their favourite magazine for Christmas, and I'm going to be looking over what they select and then taking a bunch of them home. So far, there's a brilliant issue of True Photo Journal, which I'm looking forward to having a good look at. Because one of the frustrations of doing what I do is that there just isn't time enough to read enough magazines. So it will be a time to take some home and have a good look.
Thank you as always, Jeremy. You can visit his shop in London weekdays and Saturdays, or just go to magculture.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor, Jack Dewars. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fb@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can listen again at monocle.com or subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. It's goodbye from me.